You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
The sound of my childhood. Guys, it is episodes like this that bring me to the table, getting a chance to talk about something so core to my childhood. Man, this one's gonna be special. Thank you guys for tuning in to yet another episode of Systematic Geekology. We are two of the priests to the geeks. I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Tejas. How you doing?
The Apex legend, I would prefer. Thank you. My name is TJ Blackwell. I've been geeking out on Apex lately, just because I'm about that ranked grind right now.
Yeah, you're a better man than me. That's a grind. I have been geeking out on a game called Little Hope. It's like 2 parts movie and 1 part game. It's, you basically control the characters and make choices along the way, and it's horror themed, and your choices affect the storyline. And it's a part of a whole series of games that my brother introduced my wife and I to. And it's part of the series that the Quarry is a part of. It's one of the earlier games. Dark Picture Anthology, I think it's called. Anyway,
okay, I know what you're talking about. Like Man of Medan and that stuff. Yeah,
it is phenomenal. I am a sucker for choose your own adventure stories. Man, out of all of the people, I just got to start off by saying, out of all of the people that I thought that I would be sitting across from having this particular conversation, which, by the way, if you didn't catch it from the beginning, today we are beginning our conversation on Mortal Kombat. And dude, I'm simultaneously shocked, but also not shocked at all that you're the one that's like, yes, give me a double dose of that Mortal Kombat goodness.
Oh yeah. No, my video game niche has always been fighting games and racing games. I just recently got into like the whole FPS scene, which is why I'm, constantly on it, because I have to catch up. But I've been playing fighting games since I was old enough to play games. I'm all about it.
I grew up, so I was part of that Halo era of gamers. So I was kind of forced into the FPS scene, but I was never really good at it. I just kind of was fine. It was more of a hanging out with friends sort of thing. Fighting games, on the other hand, that and what is now considered retro gaming. Let me go adjust my AARP. Hang on. That was my main wheelhouse. So when I have very distinct memories of picking up the original my parents picking up the original Mortal Kombat, and just I remember they were very surprised at how much bloodshed this game had. And trust me, I did not grow up in like a Christian household, so it wasn't like there was any kind of, misgivings about any of that kind of stuff. They're like, isn't this made for kids? And like, at the same token, I'm playing games like Sonic and stuff like that is like as little kid friendly as you're going to get for that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was. I remember, like, we would play the FPS games, right? But we never had internet at my house, so like I could play them. I could play the story mode. I loved the Halo games. I did Halo 2 Lasso, barely, which we might need to do an episode on. But Lasso is legendary. All skulls on. It's like the hardest challenge in gaming. Some people think. I don't think it's that bad. But I was good at the campaign, but I never got to play against other people. You don't get like the same. It's not the same thing. It really isn't. So recently, got online, like multiplayer FPS. But I definitely, anytime I would go to somebody's house, I would bring my copy of, Soul Calibur 4, Mortal Kombat 9, Blaze Blue, Continuum Shift, Street Fighter 4, Ultra, all of them. Just because, we'd just go through them. And that's what I would prefer to do. They'd boot up Modern Warfare 2, and I'd lose a couple games, and then we'd play every fighting game I brought, and we'd see, the state of the living room the end of a couple hours.
Yeah, I for me it was for outside of like your Nintendos and stuff like that. As the consoles advanced, it was very much fighting games and wrestling games, which basically are the same premise, just slightly tweaked. But yeah, that's funny how eerily similar that sounds to some of my backstory growing up in the sticks. Internet at home is not necessarily always an option. And so, yeah, there's just something about missing out on the online component of FPSs that just kind of puts you behind the eight ball a little bit in
Yeah.
comparison to other people.
Yeah.
So, we're starting off the conversation with the 2D era of Mortal Kombat. So Mortal Kombat has a long lineage at this point. Started in the 90s and has gone through, and their last one came out in, was that 19? The last game came out?
The box somewhere. I think it's 19.
Yeah. And so it all starts off with that the tournament. Everybody knows about the tournament, and this era goes through 1, 2, 3, Ultimate, and Trilogy. And this was some of the first storytelling that I remember being enamored with. You know what I mean? Like, this, for my little kid brain, kind of had stakes. You know what I mean? Like, you had to win the tournament in order to save humankind. And then when it switches over to, oh, now we have to go into Outworld to win that tournament to save humankind and all of that. This was just such simplistic storytelling, but so captivating to me at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think being able to tell the same story over and over and over again is something you can really only do in a fighting game.
Yeah.
Because the premise may be the same, but they're going to change the rest of the game so it feels fresh to me. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm going to play it anyway.
That doesn't always happen successfully when it's attempted, but honestly, like, that is one of the beautiful things about fighting games to me. Is it's not about adding a whole bunch of different, changing the game dynamics. The game dynamics are the fun part. It's changing the story to tell a different story around the same game mechanics. You know what I mean? And any of them that you look at, if you look at Street Fighter, if you look at Tekken, if you look at Mortal Kombat, all of these different, tentpole stories, if you look at their first couple of games, if they're a multi-generational franchise, you look at the first couple of games, and a lot of the time it's, now we have to do this particular thing and fight for this particular reason, and so on and so forth. And you just kind of find yourself in that same place. But if it's done right, each game should be building on the mythology of the one that came before it. You know what I mean? Like, the first Mortal Kombat was based in Earth, and it was the invasion of Outworld and them trying to take over Earth, and Earthrealm lost the last 9 tournaments, and so their back is against the wall, and enter our protagonist, off and on, but mainly on, of the entirety of the Mortal Kombat series, Liu Kang.
Liu Kang.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you first got into Mortal Kombat, did you go that very standard route of, this guy is very clearly supposed to be the hero of this story, and so this is going to be my favorite character, or did you gravitate to somebody else?
So for me, I really started playing these games in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3.
Okay.
On the DS. Crazy, right? Came with like the Tetris Mortal Kombat. Never played that part, but for whatever reason, I started playing the game, and I was like, man, Cabal is awesome. So I was just a Cabal main, and I am in every game. It's either Cabal or Smoke. I'm a huge fan of Smoke. I love Smoke.
Me too.
Yeah, I love Smoke. But for me, it was Cabal. Liu Kang, I thought was really boring
Yeah.
at first. So I just like, oh, screw that guy. I'm not interested. Go be the main character of the story. I don't care. Cabal
Right.
runs fast.
Yeah. Yeah. That very thing, it's interesting to me. I want to put a pin in that, but you said he seemed boring. And that was a lot of the same thing for me. So my first guy was Sub-Zero. I absolutely gravitated towards Sub-Zero, and then once Smoke was introduced, Smoke became my guy. And I would kind of go for, I don't know. I always tended more towards like either anti-hero or villain characters or that sort of thing, off from who is very clearly the main character, the leading force of the franchise. It's interesting because I look back, and this just kind of fits in with the time, but you didn't realize how much this franchise changed gaming and kind of what was acceptable for gaming, and even that this was a proof of concept. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people hear what we said about kind of repackaging the same game mechanic but with a different story as boring. I question the fact that most of those people also like first person shooters, and FPSs are the same game mechanics centered around, a different story, but I digress. But so much of this had ripple effects that shaped the way that gaming would go on forward.
Yeah. I think if we were rating like all time video game influence, number one would probably be like Street Fighter or Call of Duty. But Mortal Kombat's like comfortably in the 2 to 3. Like it is insane how much
I
Mortal
would say
Kombat
that
itself
those
changed.
three that you just said are probably the top three that I can think of, unless you're counting like initial proof of concepts with things like Pong or Mario or those kinds of things.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, those don't
those
count.
ones that lit the spark that walked so that way these other games could run and all of that. Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that to look at the linear influence from that time to what is most popular now and what most people flock to now, I would absolutely agree with you that that's probably the top three as far as influence. And honestly, for me, it depends on what day you ask me as to what order I would put those three in, because they're so interchangeable in a lot of ways.
I think actually I would probably put Halo in there instead of Call of Duty. Halo Combat Evolved, the first one. But they were close. But
Right.
it's because Midway played Street Fighter and they were like, okay, this is cool. This is too hard to play. Like if you've played the first Street Fighter on an arcade cabinet, even if you know the moves, it is extremely hard to consistently do any special moves in Street Fighter 1. And Mortal Kombat was like, what if this was significantly easier and there was more happening on the screen?
Yeah.
What if we just got really bloody? And so that's what they did, and it worked great. And I mean, if you've played Mortal Kombat 1 or 2 on the arcade cabinet, it is still a lot more difficult than you're probably used to do all the special moves. But it's nowhere near as hard as it was for Street Fighter. And they learned from Mortal Kombat, like, okay, a whole lot of people are playing it. We need to make this easier to do so people continue to play our game.
Yeah, and honestly, that was really what the biggest differentiation was for me between those two franchises, because I grew up when a lot of those initial ones were coming out where you could really see the difference between and also in the arcade. If you were going to, it was just kind of universally known on the playground that if you were going to go to an arcade, Street Fighter was just a more challenging game and was going to eat more of your quarters than Mortal Kombat would. And because they have you have kind of the set 4 attacks, and then you see significantly shorter combo strings in order to get off special moves and things like that. And that's before they even introduced background stuff and like interacting with the background and all of those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I honestly, that's probably one of the most compelling things about Mortal Kombat that has led to their success is before they even had like more of the story where you get into like Shao Kahn and Outworld and Shinnok and the Elder Gods and all of that kind of stuff. When they actually start to really tell the story, you had this bloody side-scrolling fighter that essentially was just it was a gory 10-year-old boy's dream to be fighting in like this, that with these backdrops and all this kind of stuff. And you were just hoping that somehow you could, knock your opponent off the ledge and they would fall down into the spikes, which shout out to the movie for making that a thing and actually bringing that to life at the end. That was
Yeah,
awesome, but we'll
that
get
was
there.
cool.
So yeah, I'm curious, and I think I'm about to feel really old. Did you have an opportunity to play any of these games in the arcade?
I mean, not in the original run, but
Right.
there is actually a barcade a couple minutes away that has a Mortal Kombat 2 cabinet.
Oh, nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, it's right next to an axe throwing place. So whenever we go over there, we'll go hit the Mortal Kombat 2 arcade, of course. It's also the only fighting game it has, which
Oh,
I thought was
interesting.
weird. But it's a good one, so I'm not mad. But it's funny
Yeah.
to see, other people try and play this old Mortal Kombat game where the inputs are harder. You can't just look up the move list.
Right.
And they just, they can't really do it.
Yeah,
But
and that's kind of that's honestly one of the things that I hear a lot from oh, that's too simplistic. Fighting games are just too simplistic and things like that. Well, go try and play one of the older fighting games. Wasn't so simplistic, and things were a lot more difficult to try and sequence and all of those kinds of things. It took actual skill and timing.
yeah, it's another thing Mortal Kombat did is they wanted to prioritize aggression. So blocking is not, back in Mortal Kombat
Right.
like most fighting games. It's a button. You just have a button to block. It's not hold backwards, which
Yep.
slows down the game for most people until you reach like a much higher skill level. That slows down the game. Mortal Kombat's like, no, let's just let them run in and hold the button for a second and then do what they want to do. And it works.
So-
It's much better for casual audience.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the key. If you look at, there's obviously always a conversation to be had about timing and about right place, right time, and all of those kinds of things. But if you look at Mortal Kombat in comparison to its contemporaries, like you said, they were willing to grow and do things different and look and see what needed to be changed and all of those kinds of things. And they were very much bleeding edge in that regard, but also they the whole presentation and timing of it is one of the biggest reasons why they've had more staying power than the rest of their contemporaries. You know what I mean? A lot of the contemporaries that you find have either gotten eaten by Soul Calibur, and Soul Calibur is more of the reason why they're still known today, or Super Smash or something along those lines. But whereas with Mortal Kombat, it kind of sits in its own world in a good way. And then you had your first two, and of course, like any good capitalist, when the iron's hot, you got to keep pumping them out, you got to keep making them and all that. And so you see 3 and 4, two, again, 1 and 2 kind of extensions of one another in a lot of respects. That's why you see most times that you see the beginning of the story depicted in some form, be it the reboot, be it the movies. They've done it a couple of different times. You see that tournament, and then you see that right there after the interaction between Earthrealm and the Outworld. Those are 2 separate parts. Part 1 and part 2, they'll just kind of get get lumped together into one story. It's not until 3 where you start to see more of the backstory fleshed out. The Elder Gods introduced, the Shinnok is introduced at this point, and you see more of the world expanding. And I can't help but look at the way that they did it, and whether or not it was intentional or not, the pacing was just bravo. Like I think their pacing for how they unfolded the story was just great.
Yeah, it's definitely, it feels more like you're witnessing a story play out in real time than I thought, for early Tekken or Street Fighter. Because it's like you're living the story. You play through the tournament. A little while later, you play through the Outworld invasion, and then Raiden does his thing. It's just more gradual, and I think that's, again, better for the casual audience. Another thing, Midway was a lot less trigger happy with its re-releases. Its cabinet updates than Capcom. I think there were like 11 versions of Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
Which is not good for the reason. I mean, it's fine, but it's cool to have that many different versions to play. But you couldn't get used to one.
Right.
Unless you were going every day to play the current one.
Right.
Which helped with casual audience retention. That's why these days Street Fighter is more the like competitive niche, and everybody plays Mortal Kombat.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure that I can point to a better example of how to make the transition that each one of these games, they all kind of hit the same roadblock of people of home console and the home console market, and the shift away from going to arcades and needing to compete at a console level, which is exactly why we got Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, because they released Mortal Kombat 3 in its original like arcade variant on consoles, and people got mad because it had less playable characters than 2, and just kind of people felt shortchanged as a console release. And so they slap Ultimate on it, unlock everybody, give everybody as a playable character, and then re-release. And I'm not sure we saw another group more willingly make the shift over to home console out of this generation of fighting titles and things.
No. It's I mean, Capcom sort of, but they just released a home console edition of Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter, God, what is the other one? They released like a home console version for a ton of versions for each Street Fighter game instead of committing to one, which is fine. I own like 16 of them, but a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah, I remember my parents asking me when I was a kid, when you'd go to the store and pick up the Sega Genesis carts and all of that, or go to the rental store and rent Genesis carts. They'd be like, "Well, wait, didn't you just rent that game? Didn't you just get that game?" And I had to explain to them that nope, it's a different game, because they just released 87 versions of the same game, just with different Greek alphabet letters attached to it. Alpha, beta, you know what I mean?
Alpha Street Fighter 3, Third Strike.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate enough to be prominent in the scene after that.
Yeah.
In the era where if they had to update the game, they could just update the game and not sell you a whole new game. But I have heard horror stories of people, buying, Super Street Fighter 4 for $60, and then a month later, Ultra Street Fighter 4 comes out, and it's a different game for another $60.
Yep.
And that's the one you have to play because that's when everyone's playing.
Yeah, everybody talks about so my generation is filled with a bunch of curmudgeonly people, just being honest. We are a curmudgeonly sort, and we will yell at the clouds whenever you give us an opportunity to yell at the clouds. And one of the yelling at the cloud moments that we have a lot of times for 30 somethings is Kids these days don't know what it means to get a complete game. And it's this argument that DLC is the downfall of gaming. There's always a downfall of gaming. The elimination of couch co-op was the last one before that. That was the downfall of gaming. Don't get
I
me
agree
wrong.
with that, though.
I really, really, and let me just, in case for those of you that didn't catch us, really prefer couch co-op to online multiplayer. Like, I always will. That's the era that I grew up in. I will always prefer couch co-op. But
Yep.
You gotta allow for innovation if you want the thing that you love to stay around, and you want to be able to take a step back and say, you know what, this person of a different generation also likes this thing because it changed, and because the way that they did it, innovated with the time and all of that kind of stuff. But I digress. But yeah, I was in that same. I was of that generation, in that scene of people that, like, we all talk about how wonderful it was when we would get these full and complete games and it wasn't DLC and all of that kind of stuff. Well, yeah, that also opened the door for stuff like this to happen, where you either got a crap game that there was really no means other than the magazines, which were delayed. You weren't going to get a review of it. You couldn't pop on YouTube to get a review of things. So you didn't know what quality of game you were getting. And I do think that we romanticize sometimes how good some of these games were. But also at the same token, like, they would pull stunts like this, where you have, MK3, MK Ultimate, MK Trilogy, which are essentially remasters of the same game. They're all basically the same game. Slight tweaks, slight character differences, slight balancing differences, different things like that. Like, there are changes, but not very many. You know what I mean? And that, I think we need to keep a full and complete picture of what things were before we had the opportunity to sample games or to have games changed or updated when there's a major flaw in the game itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think Capcom is still the worst offender. They got away with it until 2014 when they released Ultra Street Fighter 4 on the console. But if you do just want to blame DLC for ruining gaming, that's all Bethesda's fault. That is Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion with the horse armor, which, just something really small that does not add much to the game that you had to pay money for. The horse armor DLC for Oblivion was $20 full and did nothing except put a cosmetic armor on your horse.
There you go.
Well, I did a couple other things, but they're very small. But fighting games actually have been particularly egregious with the tiny, ineffectual DLC lately, especially lately. For a long time, it's just been, you can buy this character, $6, add it to your game, instead of making a whole new game to put that character in.
Right.
I kind of like that. That's cool with me. Smash Bros. Does it. Guilty Gear does it. Tekken, they all do it now. Even Mortal Kombat does it. Mortal Kombat 11, if you don't buy Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate, not the same as what we were talking about before. It includes all the other characters. But if you buy a base Mortal Kombat 11, you have to buy all of the characters. Or you can spend a little bit more money, get Ultimate Mortal Kombat 11, or Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate, and get all of the DLC characters included.
Right.
Some of the worst examples, though, of fighting game DLC, Tekken 7 made people pay to get the frame data for the moves in the game. So you had to pay like $5 to get the frame data for your moves, which doesn't matter at all to a casual audience. But for people like me who like to know the numbers and like to know what I can possibly do in a situation, that stuff's important. Guilty Gear Strive did the same thing, which sucks because I love Guilty Gear Strive, but I also have the season pass, which is the only way you can get the frame data for your moves in the game. Just build it in. Just build it in. Simple.
Yeah, I'm not wholly against DLC. I think that in the right context, I think it can add to a game. I do think that it gets out of bounds with some of these different reskins and different things like that a lot of times Call of Duty will do, with all of these different characters that they introduced that are just characters. They're just reskins of the base person. They're not like, there's nothing new about them. So really, you're just paying for a cosmetic thing. And like to me, there's a difference between that and like paying to actually get something that will improve the game or add on to the game or something along those lines.
Mhm.
You know, honestly, I think that there's ways to thread that needle of still being able to have certain things that are only unlockable by completing the game, and then other things that are add-ons that you can pay for along the way. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Mortal Kombat does that really well these days in the modern
yeah,
era because their
yeah,
DLC is more story and more characters. And you don't have to
right.
buy a whole new game.
That's one of the things that I appreciate the most out of their newest entry is is just the cinematics of it all, the story that got told, and that was in the way that they told the story was just awesome. But again, we'll get there. There's just so much meat on the bone as far as this goes. But from a game perspective, right? If what you're looking for is just bone crunching carnage candy on a more trimmed down platform, these are the games. You know, there
Mhm.
are other games that are good. I am a huge fighting game fan, so I could sit here and rattle off 10 fighting games that from this era that are just awesome. But this to me holds a special place for a lot of reasons, but to me, I don't think that there is even a conversation for a clear competitor for a number one spot for the best fighting game at this point in time. We're not talking about current stuff or what came next or whatever, because there is a dark period a little bit for the Mortal Kombat franchise. But in this glory time of fighting games, I just, for what it is and for its contemporaries, I'm not sure that there's anything better than the original run of 2D Mortal Kombat games.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll get your Street Fighter Puritans, your
Yeah,
overseas King of Fighters guys. But at the end of the day, Mortal Kombat's just more fun,
yeah, yeah.
I think, especially on the old ones. The new ones, they're all good. But on the old ones, it's definitely Mortal Kombat's the easiest and sometimes the stupidest. I think Reptile had like an infinite combo in Mortal Kombat 1,
Yep.
which is, of course, borderline impossible to pull off because it's on 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's two.
Yeah. It's hard to do, but it's possible. You can just kill him after you touch him once.
Yep.
But that was also the last time they let Reptile be good in a Mortal Kombat game, and that's upsetting.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is.
He was okay in 9.
They
but,
did him dirty.
man,
I am a Puritan for Ninja Reptile. I don't know what this lizard monstrosity is that they introduced. I am absolutely more of a fan of the Green Ninja.
I kind of like the lizard Reptile. You know, it's multicolored ninjas. That's whatever. We still have enough of those, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We still have Sub-Zero and Scorpion and Smoke and Noob Saibot and Rain and Scarlet. Like,
Yeah.
I'm over it. Let one of them be just messed up,
Yeah.
in my
I
opinion.
can see where you're coming from.
He could still be better.
All right, so I wanna now pull the pin on that thing that came up before, and I want to have a conversation about Liu Kang. Editor's note: there's like 3 or 4 different very famous sound bites that you can find of Liu Kang. Toasty. There's the sound. There's a sound effect of him doing the bicycle kick. There's tons of them. Yeah, look around, find some of those sound bites, and go ahead and have a field day. So Liu Kang, the protagonist of Mortal Kombat, he is the chosen one. It is very much his hero's journey that the rest of these characters are wrapped up in, and it's kind of, you know, it's not until you kind of get past 3, I think, is the tipping point where it's no longer just out and out, this is the Liu Kang show, right? I think that's where you start to see more of an introduction of meaningful storylines from other characters and not just the new flavor of ice cream to go against our conquering hero. And it's interesting that you use that word boring, because I think in a lot of ways you find a lot of the same things said about Liu Kang as you hear about the Big Blue Boy Scout, or you hear about the detractors of Goku, and people that are very clearly supposed to be this holier than thou kind of upper echelon character in a sea of other people that sometimes are more compelling, but because they aren't the main character, they don't get as much meat on the bone.
Yeah, I just think personally for me, it's different because I think Liu Kang is a loser. Such an interesting world, and Liu Kang can kick really fast and shoot fireballs.
Yeah.
Until more recently. But like his best friend is a saw for a hat.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That Kung Lao is I really hope that Kung Lao is a big part of, if they do actually go forward with a new game set in the new world that is created, that I really hope that we find out more about Kung Lao, because that's a whole untapped well of conversation. So Kung Lao, for those of you that don't know, the mythology of Goro is built around killing this great, conquering hero Kung Lao that Liu Kang is a descendant of. And so you hear about the great legendary Kung Lao referred to as, and I honestly, I'll be honest with you, I remember having distinct experiences of of playing Mortal Kombat where I would hear references made to the great Kung Lao, and I'm like, okay, I'd rather that than Liu Kang. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather have Kung Lao be the introduction piece, that somehow we bring back Kung Lao and he's but whatever, than just this, I'll say it, milquetoast hero that is this centerpiece that, like you said, he kicks really fast and he shoots fireballs. And to a kid at the time, when you compare him with a guy that shoots a rope basically out of the palm of his hand, or somebody who has ice powers or something like that, or killer robots, it's just kind of, I don't know, a bland conquering hero archetype, to use words that I can use now, that I can put lyrics to now, that I would have no idea was a thing at that point in time, when I just knew that he was boring,
Yeah. It's just not as interesting as the dude with robot legs and hook swords that could also shoot a fireball.
Right.
Yeah.
So. You see so many different aspects of what Liu Kang can do done better by others while they're doing other things also. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And honestly, it wasn't until I think we are going to see, as much as we see an evolution in the storytelling, we're also going to see an evolution in Liu Kang as a character and how he's used and all of those kinds of things. But honestly, this is very deep in that part of the story where Liu Kang is just generic hero number 5 that comes to save the day and all of that. Honestly, that's part of what I loved about the movie, is at least they gave him some personality and gave him wisecracking lines and gave him sarcasm and a little bit more depth of character than just, your conquering hero, Jean-Claude Van Damme archetype number 5,
Yeah. But man, Jean-Claude Van Damme, perfect character for Liu Kang.
Yeah. So,
or Johnny Cash.
a little tongue in cheek. They originally wanted Jean-Claude Van Damme to be the archetype for Liu Kang, and that was he was supposed to be the character going forward. We would see that he would be more closely associated with Street Fighter because of that movie, which we'd have to do an episode on at some point in time, because that original movie is ridiculous. For all the people that hate on Armageddon, I'm like, y'all are hating on Armageddon, but we're just letting Street Fighter go through untalked about. That's cool, but that's not okay. Cool.
Yeah, man. I'm not going to pretend the Mortal Kombat movies are actually good movies, but they're definitely not as bad as the Street Fighter movie.
Oh, one unequivocally, both, and I'm saying this for all three, honestly, of the Mortal Kombat movies, and you'll have to tune in once we get to there when we start talking about the movies to have a more fleshed out opinion. But I think all three of those movies stand up better than any of the movies that Street Fighter put out, and I personally am including the animated movie in that. But so this is kind of where we put a pin in the conversation for now, as far as where everything sits. We'll see if Liu Kang continues to be a messiah figure. Spoilers, he does in different, and honestly, they just turned the volume up on that as time goes on.
Yeah. Way up.
Honestly, it's interesting to me that each one of these characters, I'm gonna use Liu Kang, Superman, and Goku. Before we wrap up, I know I just kind of went into the wrap up, but before we actually put a pin in this, I think it's interesting that you have plenty of people that would call any three of those characters boring or milquetoast or predictable or something along those lines. And yeah, some of those things at different points in time are all true. But as far as just an out and out egregious offender of being the stereotype without much more effort put into it in these early days of the Mortal Kombat franchise, for my money, for as great as these games are, and I could sit here and we could go, if you guys are listening to this real time, you're about 45 minutes into listening to TJ and I gush over, these movies or these games. And we could go another 45 minutes very easily. But the weakest part is their main character. The weakest part is Liu Kang, and I think that is the biggest offender for just going the path of least resistance and making a stereotypical character rather than a character that has depth and nuance underneath that archetype.
Mm-hmm. Liu Kang is all up front. This dude is the chosen one. He's the Mary Sue. He can get it done. And if he can't get it done, he'll be able to in a few minutes.
Yep. Give him a couple of minutes in the hyperbolic time chamber and he'll be all right. I'm just being honest. That, you know what I mean? Like that is very, but I would almost argue, and here's a question to ponder, right? Does a series like Mortal Kombat get as far as it has without starting off without starting off with a conquering hero? You know what I mean? Like, you've got your superhero, the guy leading the charge, the guy that, if you want that character, you can put, little kids can hope in the main character and the main hero of Liu Kang. But does this franchise continue on for as long as it does without a character like Liu Kang to be able to kind of prop up story progression while these other side characters are off doing their own thing? Or are you of the opinion that, just put it in the hands of the misfits and the ridiculous characters and things like that, and then have more of a tentpole Kung Lao character that comes in every once in a while when stuff really gets real?
I feel like if they didn't have their Liu Kang, it would end up a lot more like the Killer Instinct series, which is popular, but nowhere near as popular as Mortal Kombat. Fell out of relevance for a very long time.
Yeah.
And just isn't as well loved or appreciated.
Yeah. So side note, as far as that goes, I actually did not realize that Killer Instinct had made a comeback until I saw it pop up on Game Pass, and it took me down a whole rabbit hole of emulators and a whole generation of people trying to bring this game back. And I did my 90s kid heart well, because I remember when that game came out. And I think you're right. I think because of all of the different varying superpowers that the different characters have, I could definitely see a world where it would go the way of like a Killer Instinct without having this main character that so much emphasis can be put on.
Yeah, like definitely it would still be a cult classic.
Yeah,
for sure. Like Darkstalkers, but it would not be Mortal Kombat.
So, this is like we said, this is first in what's going to be, we're going to talk about all of the different generations of the Mortal Kombat games. So to listen to our wonderful takes of these games and everything else that we are putting out, don't forget that you can check us out at systematicgeekology.org. And if you want to hear even more from us, hear more of our special movie reviews of the Narniad that we've been doing along the way in the year of Lewis, as well as a variety of other specials, you can check out patreon.com/systematic geekology and help us keep the lights on. Before we wrap up, what you want to tell the people what you have for recommendations?
Now that I'm in like a fighting game mood, I have to recommend Guilty Gear. Any of them. Guilty Gear is such a unique fighting series. Guilty Gear Strive is fantastic. I don't recommend buying it until you know you like the series, because it is Guilty Gear. It is a little different. The archetypes vary wildly, a lot more than most games, but it is so good and remarkably well balanced.
Yeah,
like it's the only fighting game I can think of where I can see the worst character in the game winning the biggest tournament in the world. It could happen in Guilty Gear Strive.
Yeah,
it's also just wacky and fun, so play it.
It really is. If what you like is more of the arcade side rather than like the deep, rich, nuanced storytelling side, if you want an arcade style fighting game that's a little bit off from center of what you know to be a standard fighting game, then absolutely check out Guilty Gear. I think it's one of the more underrated series within fighting games.
Oh yeah, and if you just want to learn about it, they have comic books, and the story in every game is just a visual novel. You can just find them online.
For me, I am going to suggest we mentioned it in this episode. You go do yourself a favor. Check out Mortal Kombat 1995. Go check out, if you can find it, Defenders of the Realm. It was a short-lived cartoon that Mortal Kombat came out with that was around the same time of the original run. It was part of Mortal Kombat going on everything and them diversifying the IP as much as they could, and all of that. I like it. A lot of critical response that you're going to hear of it is that it sucks. But honestly, just if you're going into it for a popcorn cartoon, made for little kids and all of that, it's wonderful. And then do yourself the favor and check out Mortal Kombat Armageddon, because it is asinine in all of the best ways. It is absolutely ridiculous, and please do not go in thinking that it's going to be a good movie, but it is good for being a bad game.
Yeah. Do you want to see Liu Kang turn into a dragon?
But like actually turn into a bipedal dragon. Yeah,
like legit turns into the logo.
Yeah.
If you don't want to see that, don't watch the movie.
Yeah, that's what you're in for. And mud fight scenes and everything in between. It is, like I said, a product of its time for sure.
Yeah. You want to see Goro get punched in the balls?
Yeah, classic. That's about it. So, thank you guys for joining us for another wonderful adventure into one of our favorite geekdoms. To hear more from any of our esteemed panel of hosts, you can go to systematicgeekology.org. Check out the host tab. All of our side projects and various different things are located there. And remember, as always, that we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries podcast network.